Over the past several years, the debate over the efficacy and implementation of the Affordable Care Act has highlighted the deep divides in the U.S. over the need for the cost of the entire social welfare net in the U.S. All this might have you wondering about the roots and history of social welfare in its many forms in America. Here's my video. Federal Employers Liability Act, 1908. At the turn of the 20th century, most industrial workplaces were dangerous. Prior to the passage of the Act, FELA, injured workers had to seek relief in court, proving not only the injury, but it wasn't their fault, and they hadn't assumed the risk of the work site. Congress enacted FELA in 1908, which provided compensation to injured rail workers when the railroad was at fault. Successful, many states chose to model FELA and apply it to other industries, and shortly thereafter the first workers' compensation laws were enacted. By 1930, only Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, and South Carolina had not yet enacted legislation. Mother's Pension Movement, 1911. Also at the turn of the 20th century, as many flocked to the cities, family life was changing, and increasingly single mothers were isolated. In response, progressives pushed for local and state governments to take responsibility for these families' care. Scoring its first statewide victory in Illinois in 1911, the Mother's Pension Movement swept 40 states in less than a decade. Eventually, these states' local initiatives were subsumed by the New Deal's Aid to Families with Dependent Children, AFDC. Social Security Retirement 1935, Disability 1956, and SSI 1972 benefits. The economic meltdown of the 1930s, known as the Great Depression, wiped out the lifetime savings of seniors, and poverty among the elderly was a growing concern. To protect Americans from the hazards of life, in 1935, the Social Security Act was signed into law. Among its many provisions to provide economic assistance were old age benefits under Title II, or what we now think of as Social Security. In 1939, the old age program was amended to include spouses and children who relied on the income from a breadwinner. In 1956, President Eisenhower expanded the Social Security Act to include disability insurance. Although originally this expansion only covered people aged 50 to 64, today includes people of all ages and their dependents. SSI was created in 1972 under President Nixon and was designed to provide cash assistance to aged, blind, and disabled individuals. For many years before the baby boomers began retiring, Social Security was taking in more than it was spending, and those excess revenues were placed in a trust fund. In recent years, however, the program has been running in a deficit, and expenditures are made as forecasted. The Social Security Trust Fund will be depleted by 2033. Unemployment insurance, 1935. The Great Depression, 1929 to 1939, devastated the American economy, and within 3 months of the crash of 1929, the stock market lost 40% of its value, and $26 billion of wealth disappeared. Unemployment exceeded 25%, and about 10,000 banks failed. Wages paid to workers declined from $50 billion in 1929 to only $30 billion in 1932. To deal with these high rates of unemployment, the states began programs that provided workers unemployment insurance. Wisconsin was the first in 1932, and many soon followed its example. Prior to the inclusion of a UI program in the Social Security Act of 1935, California, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Utah, and Washington had also enacted employment insurance programs. In 1935, law gave the states the freedom to implement their programs, and by August 1937, 48 states, Alaska, Hawaii, and District of Columbia enacted their own employment insurance laws. Aid to Families and Dependent Children, 1935. Built upon the foundation of the Mother's Pensions, the Social Security Act of 1935 also included the AFDC, which provided a subsidy to families with fathers who were deceased, absent, or unable to work, and was viewed as a means of extending help to these families who had the misfortune to lose a breadwinner and who, it was widely believed, should not be forced to rely on the paid work of a mother who belonged at home. The AFDC remained the primary form of welfare assistance in the U.S. until it was replaced with temporary assistance for needy families in the 1990s. National School Lunch Program, 1946. The school lunch program was originally seen as a measure of national security to safeguard the health and well-being of the nation's children and to encourage domestic consumption of nutritious agricultural commodities and other food. In 2013, many lunches were served as part of this successful program, and 70.5% of those were free or at a reduced price. Food stamps, 1964. Many localities had developed food stamp programs during the Great Depression as a way to combat hunger and help local farmers, but these were discontinued as the economy improved. In 1964, as part of President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, a federal food stamp program was implemented to improve nutrition among low-income households. Successful by 1974, 15 million people were participating in the food stamp program, and as a result of our recent Great Recession, by September 2013, 47 million Americans, one-sixth of the country, are receiving food stamps. In February 2014, Obama signed an $8.7 billion food stamp cut into law, which caused 850,000 households. What? Pause. That's 850,000 households to lose $90 each a month in food stamp benefits. Medicare, 1965. To provide health care for American seniors, Medicare came about because, as President Lyndon Johnson said, there has been increasing awareness of the fact that the full value of Social Security would not be realized unless provisions were made to deal with the problem of cost of illnesses among our older citizens. Medicare was expanded in 2006 under President George Bush to include coverage for prescription drugs in a program known as Medicare Part D. In 2013, it was estimated that $68 billion was expended on the prescription drug program. In 2010, Medicare expenditures were estimated to have been $525 billion and are projected to grow 5.9% in 2011 and only 1.7% in 2012. As of 2012, over 49 million people were benefiting from Medicare. Medicaid, 1965. From the start, Medicaid was designed to provide health care to low-income persons who would likely otherwise go without it. A partnership between the states and Uncle Sam, the federal government dispersed Medicaid grants to those states that chose to participate in the program, which was not mandatory. Although many states willingly signed on, some held out, including Arizona, which did not begin offering Medicaid benefits until 1982. The act has been amended many times, modified to include the elderly and disabled and certain AFDC-eligible recipients, illegal immigrants with emergency conditions, pregnant women and infants, and low-income children. In 1997, Medicaid was expanded and empowered the states to provide benefits to children whose families earned up to 200% of poverty under the state's Children's Health Care Insurance Program. The Affordable Care Act recently expanded Medicaid's reach even further to now include those with income below 133% of poverty and certain adults without children. Women, infants, and children, also known as WIC, 1972. The Supplemental Nutrition Program was designed to address early age malnutrition that was a major cause of developmental problems among low-income children. Although a pilot program in 1972, it became a permanent fixture in the social welfare net in 1975. In 2013, nearly 8.7 million women participated in WIC at a cost of $6.5 billion. Earned Income Tax Credit, 1975. To address what many saw as welfare's disincentives to work, Congress passed the Earned Income Tax Credit that provides tax breaks to low-income workers who frequently end up paying no income tax. Although many today complain about the credit, conservative President Ronald Reagan famously described it as the best anti-poverty, the best pro-family, the best job creation measure to come out of Congress. In 2010, 27.5 million low and moderate income working families benefited from the Earned Income Tax Credit. The Energy Assistance Program, to address the needs of low-income families who were having the trouble heating their homes in the face of increasing energy costs. Congress passed the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program, also known as LIHEAP. Although originally only covering heating costs, in 1984 the law was amended to include cooling costs as well. Funding has declined slightly in recent years, dropping from $3.47 billion to $3.255 billion in 2013. Temporary assistance for needy families. In response to what many had seen as AFDC dependency contributing to generational poverty and disincentives to work, Congress replaced the old welfare program with TANF through a law titled the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. TANF made several changes to the welfare system, including setting time limits on benefits, requiring recipients to work a certain number of hours, providing incentives to the states to reduce their welfare rolls, and incentives to reduce births to unmarried mothers. Called by many welfare to work and touted as a success, the program, particularly early in its administration, had some critics. In 2011, over 4 million people received benefits under TANF. Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act 2010. Hotly debated and highly contested, even after it was passed, the Republican House of Representatives voted 46 times to end it. The Affordable Care Act expanded the nation's social welfare net by, among other things, eliminating pre-existing conditions, ending lifetime coverage limits, allowing young adults to stay on their parents' insurance, and providing for preventative care. The law also expanded Medicaid to cover people who earn up to 133% of poverty and required most others to purchase insurance, although those making up to 400% of poverty may receive cash subsidies. While the individual mandate to buy insurance is seen as overwhelming loss of individual liberty and freedom by many on the right, in 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court held the mandate was constitutional. Other challenges to the act remain undecided, such as its requirement that employees provide contraception, which opponents of the law call an attack on religious liberty. In December and January, the Supreme Court granted states allowing certain groups not to comply with the law, pending the outcome of existing lawsuits that are set for oral arguments in March 2014. Another problem with the Act's implementation is the broken promise, if you like your plan, you can keep it, which turned out to not be entirely true. To add insult to injury, although President Obama repeatedly made this promise during the 2012 campaign, it appears that he knew the statement wasn't completely true even then. But then again, politicians have been known to lie from time to time.